Joseph Stalin. The Foundations of Leninism. 8. The Party. In the pre-revolutionary period, the period of more or less peaceful development, when the parties of the Second International were the predominant force in the working-class movement and parliamentary forms of struggle were regarded as the principal forms, under these conditions the party neither had nor could have had that great and decisive importance which it acquired afterwards, under conditions of open revolutionary clashes. Defending the Second International against attacks made upon it, Kautsky says that the parties of the Second International are an instrument of peace and not of war, and that for this very reason they were powerless to take any important steps during the war, during the period of revolutionary action by the proletariat. That is quite true. But what does it mean? It means that the parties of the Second International are unfit for the revolutionary struggle of the proletariat, that they are not militant parties of the proletariat, leading the workers to power, but election machines adapted for parliamentary elections and parliamentary struggle. This, in fact, explains why, in the days when the opportunists of the Second International were in the ascendancy, it was not the party but its parliamentary group that was the chief political organization of the proletariat. It is well known that the party at that time was really an appendage and subsidiary of the parliamentary group. It scarcely needs proof that under such circumstances and with such a party at the helm there could be no question of preparing the proletariat for revolution. But matters have changed radically with the dawn of the new period. The new period is one of open class collisions, of revolutionary action by the proletariat, of proletarian revolution, a period when forces are being directly mustered for the overthrow of imperialism and the seizure of power by the proletariat. In this period the proletariat is confronted with new tasks, the tasks of reorganizing all party work on new, revolutionary lines, of educating the workers in the spirit of revolutionary struggle for power, of preparing and moving up reserves, of establishing an alliance with the proletarians of neighboring countries, of establishing firm ties with the liberation movement in the colonies and dependent countries, etc., etc. To think that these new tasks can be performed by the old social democratic parties, brought up as they were in the peaceful conditions of parliamentarism, is to doom oneself to hopeless despair, to inevitable defeat. If, with such tasks to shoulder, the proletariat remained under the leadership of the old parties, it would be completely unarmed. It scarcely needs proof that the proletariat could not consent to such a state of affairs. Hence the necessity for a new party, a militant party, a revolutionary party, one bold enough to lead the proletarians in the struggle for power, sufficiently experienced to find its bearings amidst the complex conditions of a revolutionary situation, and sufficiently flexible to steer clear of all submerged rocks in the path to its goal. Without such a party it is useless even to think of overthrowing imperialism, of achieving the dictatorship of the proletariat. This new party is the party of Leninism. What are the specific features of this new party? 1. The party as the advanced detachment of the working class. The party must be, first of all, the advanced detachment of the working class. The party must absorb all the best elements of the working class, their experience, their revolutionary spirit, their selfless devotion to the cause of the proletariat. But in order that it may really be the armed detachment, the party must be armed with revolutionary theory, with a knowledge of the laws of the movement, with a knowledge of the laws of revolution. Without this it will be incapable of directing the struggle of the proletariat, of leading the proletariat. The party cannot be a real party if it limits itself to registering what the masses of the working class feel and think, if it drags at the tail of the spontaneous movement, if it is unable to overcome the inertia and the political indifference of the spontaneous movement, if it is unable to rise above the momentary interests of the proletariat, if it is unable to raise the masses to the level of understanding the class interests of the proletariat. The party must stand at the head of the working class, It must see farther than the working class, it must lead the proletariat, and not drag at the tail of the spontaneous movement. The parties of the Second International, which preach Gvostism, are vehicles of bourgeois policy, which condemns the proletariat to the role of a tool in the hands of the bourgeoisie. Only a party which adopts the standpoint of advanced detachment of the proletariat and is able to raise the masses to the level of understanding the class interest of the proletariat, only such a party can divert the working class from the path of trade unionism and convert it into an independent political force. The party is the political leader of the working class. I have already spoken of the difficulties of the struggle of the working class, of the complicated conditions of the struggle, of strategy and tactics, of reserves and maneuvering, of attack and retreat. These conditions are no less complicated, if not more so, than the conditions of war. Who can see clearly in these conditions? Who can give correct guidance to the proletarian millions? No army at war can dispense with an experienced general staff if it does not want to be doomed to defeat. Is it not clear that the proletariat can still less dispense with such a general staff if it does not want to allow itself to be devoured by its mortal enemies? But where is this general staff? Only the revolutionary party of the proletariat can serve as this general staff. The working class without a revolutionary party is an army without a general staff. The party is the general staff of the proletariat. But the party cannot be only an advanced detachment. It must at the same time be a detachment of the class, part of the class, closely bound up with it by all the fibers of its being. The distinction between the advanced detachment and the rest of the working class, between party members and non-party people, cannot disappear until classes disappear. It will exist as long as the ranks of the proletariat continue to be replenished with former members of other classes, as long as the working class as a whole is not in a position to rise to the level of the advanced detachment. But the party would cease to be a party if this distinction developed into a gap, if the party turned in on itself and became divorced from the non-party masses. The party cannot lead the class if it is not connected with the non-party masses. If there is no bond between the party and the non-party masses, if these masses do not accept its leadership, if the party enjoys no moral and political credit among the masses. Recently 200,000 new members from the ranks of the workers were admitted into our party. The remarkable thing about this is the fact that these people did not merely join the party themselves, but were rather sent there by all the rest of the non-party workers, who took an active part in the admission of the new members, and without whose approval no new member was accepted. This fact shows that the broad masses of non-party workers regard our party as their party, as a party near and dear to them, in whose expansion and consolidation they are vitally interested and to whose leadership they voluntarily entrust their destiny. It scarcely needs proof that without these intangible moral threads which connect the party with the non-party masses, the party could not have become the decisive force of its class. The party is an inseparable part of the working class. We, says Lenin, are the party of a class, and therefore almost the whole class, and in times of war, in the period of civil war, the whole class, should act under the leadership of our party, should adhere to our party as closely as possible. But it would be Manilevism and Gvostism to think that at any time under capitalism almost the whole class, or the whole class, would be able to rise to the level of consciousness and activity of its advanced detachment, of its social democratic party. No sensible social democrat has ever yet doubted that under capitalism even the trade union organizations, which are more primitive and more comprehensible to the undeveloped strata, are unable to embrace almost the whole, or the whole, working class. To forget the distinction between the advanced detachment and the whole of the masses which gravitate towards it, to forget the constant duty of the advanced detachment to raise ever wider strata to this most advanced level, means merely to deceive oneself, to shut one's eyes to the immensity of our tasks, and to narrow down these tasks. See Volume Vi. pages 205–06. 2. The party as the organized detachment of the working class. The party is not only the advanced detachment of the working class. If it desires really to direct the struggle of the class, it must at the same time be the organized detachment of its class. The party's tasks under the conditions of capitalism are immense and extremely varied. The party must direct the struggle of the proletariat under the exceptionally difficult conditions of internal and external development. It must lead the proletariat in the offensive when the situation calls for an offensive. It must lead the proletariat so as to escape the blow of a powerful enemy when the situation calls for retreat. It must imbue the millions of unorganized non-party workers with the spirit of organization and endurance. But the party can fulfill these tasks only if it is itself the embodiment of discipline and organization, if it is itself the organized detachment of the proletariat. Without these conditions there can be no question of the party really leading the vast masses of the proletariat. The party is the organized detachment of the working class. The conception of the party as an organized whole is embodied in Lenin's well-known formulation of the first paragraph of our party rules, in which the party is regarded as the sum total of its organizations, and the party member as a member of one of the organizations of the party. The Mensheviks, who objected to this formulation as early as 1903, proposed to substitute for it a system of self-enrollment in the party. A system of conferring the title of party member upon every professor and high school student, upon every sympathizer and striker who supported the party in one way or another, but who did not join and did not want to join any one of the party organizations. It scarcely needs proof that had this singular system become entrenched in our party, it would inevitably have led to our party becoming inundated with professors and high school students, and to its degeneration into a loose, amorphous, disorganized formation, lost in a sea of sympathizers, that would have obliterated the dividing line between the party and the class and would have upset the party's task of raising the unorganized masses to the level of the advanced detachment. Needless to say, under such an opportunist system our party would have been unable to fulfill the role of the organizing core of the working class in the course of our revolution. From the point of view of Comrade Mardov, says Lenin, the borderline of the party remains quite indefinite, for every striker may proclaim himself a party member. What is the use of this vagueness? A wide extension of the title. Its harm is that it introduces a disorganizing idea, the confusing of class and party, see volume V, page 211. But the party is not merely the sum total of party organizations. The party is at the same time a single system of these organizations, their formal union into a single whole, with higher and lower leading bodies, with subordination of the minority to the majority, with practical decisions binding on all members of the party. Without these conditions the party cannot be a single organized whole capable of exercising systematic and organized leadership in the struggle of the working class. Formerly, says Lenin, our party was not a formally organized whole, but only the sum of separate groups, and therefore no other relations except those of ideological influence were possible between these groups. Now we have become an organized party, and this implies the establishment of authority, the transformation of the power of ideas into the power of authority, the subordination of lower party bodies to higher party bodies, see volume V, page 291. The principle of the minority submitting to the majority, the principle of directing party work from a center, not infrequently gives rise to attacks on the part of wavering elements, to accusations of bureaucracy, formalism, etc. It scarcely needs proof that systematic work by the party as one whole, and the directing of the struggle of the working class, would be impossible without putting these principles into effect. Leninism in questions of organization is the unswerving application of these principles. Lenin terms the fight against these principles, Russian nihilism and aristocratic anarchism, which deserves to be ridiculed and swept aside. Here is what Lenin says about these wavering elements in his book One Step Forward. This aristocratic anarchism is particularly characteristic of the Russian nihilist. He thinks of the party organization as a monstrous factory. He regards the subordination of the part to the whole and of the minority to the majority of serfdom. Division of labor under the direction of a center evokes from him a tragi-comical outcry against people being transformed into wheels and cogs. Mention of the organizational rules of the party calls forth a contemptuous grimace and the disdainful remark that one could very well dispense with rules altogether. It is clear, I think, that the cries about this celebrated bureaucracy are just a screen for dissatisfaction with the personal composition of the central bodies, a fig leaf. You are a bureaucrat because you were appointed by the Congress, not by my will, but against it. You are a formalist because you rely on the formal decisions of the Congress, and not on my consent. You are acting in a grossly mechanical way because you plead the mechanical majority at the party Congress and pay no heed to my wish to be co-opted. You are an autocrat because you refuse to hand over the power to the old gang. Footnote 1. See Volume V, pages 310 and 287. 3. The party as the highest form of class organization of the proletariat. The party is the organized detachment of the working class. But the party is not the only organization of the working class. The proletariat has also a number of other organizations, without which it cannot wage a successful struggle against capital: trade unions, cooperatives, factory organizations, parliamentary groups, non-party women's associations, the press, cultural and educational organizations, youth leagues, revolutionary fighting organizations, in times of open revolutionary action, Soviets of deputies as the form of state organization, if the proletariat is in power, etc. The overwhelming majority of these organizations are non-party, and only some of them adhere directly to the party, or constitute offshoots from it. All these organizations, under certain conditions, are absolutely necessary for the working class, for without them it would be impossible to consolidate the class positions of the proletariat in the diverse spheres of struggle, for without them it would be impossible to steel the proletariat as the force whose mission it is to replace the bourgeois order by the socialist order. But how can single leadership be exercised with such an abundance of organizations? What guarantee is there that this multiplicity of organizations will not lead to divergency in leadership? It may be said that each of these organizations carries on its work in its own special field, and that therefore these organizations cannot hinder one another. That, of course, is true. But it is also true that all these organizations should work in one direction, for they serve one class, the class of the proletarians. The question then arises: who is to determine the line, the general direction, along which the work of all these organizations is to be conducted? Where is the central organizations which is not only able, because it has the necessary experience, to work out such a general line, but, in addition, is in a position, because it has sufficient prestige, to induce all these organizations to carry out this line, so as to attain unity of leadership and to make hitches impossible? That organization is the party of the proletariat. The party possesses all the necessary qualifications for this because, in the first place, it is the rallying center of the finest elements in the working class, who have direct connections with the non-party organizations of the proletariat and very frequently lead them, because, secondly, the party, as the rallying center of the finest members of the working class, is the best school for training leaders of the working class, capable of directing every form of organization of their class, because, thirdly, the party, as the best school for training leaders of the working class, is, by reason of its experience and prestige, the only organization capable of centralizing the leadership of the struggle of the proletariat, thus transforming each and every non-party organization of the working class into an auxiliary body and transmission belt linking the party with the class. The party is the highest form of class organization of the proletariat. This does not mean, of course, that non-party organizations, trade unions, cooperatives, etc., should be officially subordinated to the party leadership. It only means that the members of the party who belong to these organizations and are doubtlessly influential in them should do all they can to persuade these non-party organizations to draw nearer to the party of the proletariat in their work and voluntarily accept its political leadership. That is why Lenin says that the party is the highest form of proletarian class association, whose political leadership must extend to every other form of organization of the proletariat. See Volume 25, page 194. That is why the opportunist theory of the independence and neutrality of the non-party organizations, which breeds independent members of parliament and journalists isolated from the party, narrow-minded trade union leaders and Philistine cooperative officials, is wholly incompatible with the theory and practice of Leninism. 4. The party as an instrument of the dictatorship of the proletariat. The party is the highest form of organization of the proletariat. The party is the principal guiding force within the class of the proletarians and among the organizations of that class. But it does not by any means follow from this that the party can be regarded as an end in itself, as a self-sufficient force. The party is not only the highest form of class association of the proletarians, it is at the same time an instrument in the hands of the proletariat for achieving the dictatorship, when that has not yet been achieved, and for consolidating and expanding the dictatorship when it has already been achieved. The party could not have risen so high in importance and could not have exerted its influence over all other forms of organizations of the proletariat, if the latter had not been confronted with the question of power, if the conditions of imperialism, the inevitability of wars, and the existence of a crisis had not yet demanded the concentration of all the forces of the proletariat at one point, the gathering of all the threads of the revolutionary movement in one spot in order to overthrow the bourgeoisie and to achieve the dictatorship of the proletariat. The proletariat needs the party first of all as its general staff, which it must have for the successful seizure of power. It scarcely needs proof that without a party capable of rallying around itself the mass organizations of the proletariat, and of centralizing the leadership of the entire movement during the progress of the struggle, the proletariat in Russia could not have established its revolutionary dictatorship. But the proletariat needs the party not only to achieve the dictatorship, it needs it still more to maintain the dictatorship, to consolidate and expand it in order to achieve the complete victory of socialism. Certainly, almost everyone now realizes, says Lenin, that the Bolsheviks could not have maintained themselves in power for 2.5 months, let alone 2.5 years, without the strictest, truly iron discipline in our party, and without the fullest and unreserved support of the latter by the whole mass of the working class, that is, by all its thinking, honest, self-sacrificing and influential elements, capable of leading or of carrying with them their backward strata. See Volume 25, page 173. Now, what does to maintain and expand the dictatorship mean? It means imbuing the millions of proletarians with the spirit of discipline and organization. It means creating among the proletarian masses a cementing force and a bulwark against the corrosive influence of the petty bourgeois elemental forces and petty bourgeois habits. It means enhancing the organizing work of the proletarians and re-educating and remolding the petty bourgeois strata. It means helping the masses of the proletarians to educate themselves as a force capable of abolishing classes and of preparing the conditions for the organization of socialist production. But it is impossible to accomplish all this without a party which is strong by reason of its solidarity and discipline. The dictatorship of the proletariat, says Lenin, is a stubborn struggle, bloody and bloodless, violent and peaceful, military and economic, educational and administrative, against the forces and traditions of the old society. The force of habit of millions and tens of millions is a most terrible force. Without an iron party tempered in the struggle, without a party enjoying the confidence of all that is honest in the given class, without a party capable of watching and influencing the mood of the masses, it is impossible to conduct such a strategy successfully. See Volume 25, page 190. The proletariat needs the party for the purpose of achieving and maintaining the dictatorship. The party is an instrument of the dictatorship of the proletariat. But from this it follows that when classes disappear and the dictatorship of the proletariat withers away, the party also will wither away. 5. The party as the embodiment of unity of will, unity incompatible with the existence of factions. The achievement and maintenance of the dictatorship of the proletariat is impossible without a party which is strong by reason of its solidarity and iron discipline. But iron discipline in the party is inconceivable without unity of will, without complete and absolute unity of action on the part of all members of the party. This does not mean, of course, that the possibility of conflicts of opinion within the party is thereby precluded. On the contrary, iron discipline does not preclude but presupposes criticism and conflict of opinion within the party. Least of all does it mean that discipline must be blind. On the contrary, iron discipline does not preclude but presupposes conscious and voluntary submission, for only conscious discipline can be truly iron discipline. But after a conflict of opinion has been closed, after criticism has been exhausted and a decision has been arrived at, unity of will and unity of action of all party members are the necessary conditions without which neither party unity nor iron discipline in the party is conceivable. In the present epoch of acute civil war, says Lenin, the Communist Party will be able to perform its duty only if it is organized in the most centralized manner, if iron discipline bordering on military discipline prevails in it, and if its party center is a powerful and authoritative organ, wielding wide powers and enjoying the universal confidence of the members of the party. See Volume 25, pages 282-83. This is the position in regard to discipline in the party in the period of struggle preceding the achievement of the dictatorship. The same, but to an even greater degree, must be said about discipline in the party after the dictatorship has been achieved. Whoever, says Lenin, weakens in the least the iron discipline of the party of the proletariat, especially during the time of its dictatorship, actually aids the bourgeoisie against the proletariat. See Volume 25, page 190. But from this it follows that the existence of factions is compatible neither with the party's unity nor with its iron discipline. It scarcely needs proof that the existence of factions leads to the existence of a number of centers, and the existence of a number of centers means the absence of one common center in the party, the breaking up of unity of will, the weakening and disintegration of discipline, the weakening and disintegration of the dictatorship. Of course, the parties of the Second International, which are fighting against the dictatorship of the proletariat and have no desire to lead the proletarians to power, can afford such liberalism as freedom of factions, for they have no need at all for iron discipline. But the parties of the Communist International, whose activities are conditioned by the task of achieving and consolidating the dictatorship of the proletariat, cannot afford to be liberal or to permit freedom of factions. The party represents unity of will, which precludes all factionalism and division of authority in the party. Hence Lenin's warning about the danger of factionalism from the point of view of party unity and of affecting the unity of will of the vanguard of the proletariat as the fundamental condition for the success of the dictatorship of the proletariat, which is embodied in the special resolution of the 10th Congress of our party on party unity. 2. Hence Lenin's demand for the complete elimination of all factionalism and the immediate dissolution of all groups, without exemption, that have been formed on the basis of various platforms, on pain of unconditional and immediate expulsion from the party. See the resolution on party unity. 6. The party becomes strong by purging itself of opportunist elements. The source of factionalism in the party is its opportunist elements. The proletariat is not an isolated class. It is consistently replenished by the influx of peasants, petty bourgeois and intellectuals proletarianized by the development of capitalism. At the same time, the upper stratum of the proletariat, principally trade union leaders and members of parliament who are fed by the bourgeoisie out of the super profits extracted from the colonies, is undergoing a process of decay. This stratum of bourgeoisified workers, or the labor aristocracy, says Lenin, who are quite Philistine in their mode of life, in the size of their earnings and in their entire outlook, is the principal prop of the Second International, and, in our days, the principal social, not military, prop of the bourgeoisie. For they are real agents of the bourgeoisie in the working class movement, the labor lieutenants of the capitalist class, real channels of reformism and chauvinism. See Volume 19, page 77. In one way or another, all these petty bourgeois groups penetrate into the party and introduce into it the spirit of hesitancy and opportunism, the spirit of demoralization and uncertainty. It is they, principally, that constitute the source of factionalism and disintegration, the source of disorganization and disruption of the party from within. To fight imperialism with such allies in one's rear means to put oneself in the position of being caught between two fires, from the front and from the rear. Therefore, ruthless struggle against such elements, their expulsion from the party, is a prerequisite for the successful struggle against imperialism. The theory of defeating opportunist elements by the ideological struggle within the party, the theory of overcoming these elements within the confines of a single party, is a rotten and dangerous theory, which threatens to condemn the party to paralysis and chronic infirmity, threatens to leave the party a prey to opportunism, threatens to leave the proletariat without a revolutionary party, threatens to deprive the proletariat of its main weapon in the fight against imperialism. Our party could not have emerged onto the broad highway, it could not have seized power and organized the dictatorship of the proletariat, it could not have emerged victorious from the Civil War, if it had had within its ranks people like Marta van Dan, Patrusov and Axelrod. Our party succeeded in achieving internal unity and unexampled cohesion of its ranks primarily because it was able to in good time to purge itself of the opportunist pollution, because it was able to rid its ranks of the liquidators and Mensheviks. Proletarian parties develop and become strong by purging themselves of opportunists and reformists, social imperialists and social chauvinists, social patriots and social pacifists. The party becomes strong by purging itself of opportunist elements. With reformists, Mensheviks, in our ranks, says Lenin, it is impossible to be victorious in the proletarian revolution, it is impossible to defend it. That is obvious in principle, and it has been strikingly confirmed by the experience of both Russia and Hungary. In Russia, difficult situations have arisen many times, when the Soviet regime would most certainly have been overthrown had Mensheviks, reformists and petty bourgeois Democrats remained in our party. In Italy, where, as is generally admitted, decisive battles between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie for the possession of state power are imminent. At such a moment it is not only absolutely necessary to remove the Mensheviks, reformists, the Trotskists from the party, but it may even be useful to remove excellent communists who are liable to waver, and who reveal a tendency to waver towards unity with the reformists, to remove them from all responsible posts on the eve of a revolution, and at a moment when a most fierce struggle is being waged for its victory. The slightest wavering in the ranks of the party may wreck everything, frustrate the revolution, wrest the power from the hands of the proletariat, for this power is not yet consolidated, the attack upon it is still very strong. The desertion of wavering leaders at such a time does not weaken but strengthens the party, the working class movement in the revolution. See Volume 25, pages 462, 463, 464. Notes 1. The gang here referred to is the of Axelrod, Mardov, Poltrasov and others, who would not submit to the decisions of the Second Congress and who accused Lenin of being a bureaucrat. 2. The resolution on party unity was written by V.I. Lenin and adopted by the 10th Congress of the RCPB, held on March 8–16, 1921, see V.I. Lenin, Works, 4th Russian edition, Volume 32, pages 217–21, and also resolutions and decisions of CPSUB congresses, conferences and Central Committee plenums, Part 1, 1941, pages 364–66. End of Chapter 8.